Hi, and welcome back to Spirit Lounge. I hope you guys are doing really well, and to the continuation of the Upanisads. Today we're going to go into the second chapter of the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanishad. There are many chapters in this, and we're continuing our passage throughout this journey. So let me just bring that back onto the screen there. Okay, so the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanishad, this is chapter 2, went to chapter 1 on the previous video. This is regarded as the one of the most important of the Upanishads, as it contains 3 sections which are called Kandas, and it contains the basic identity of the individual and the universal self. It does use a lot of metaphors. You'll see this if you watch the first one. These tend to be quite long on the videos I'm doing through the Upanishads, so if you want to just watch some of it now and finish the video later, this may be appropriate, because they tend to be over an hour, sometimes an hour 20 minutes as the previous one was. So, whatever suits your schedule, feel free to split watching these over a period. So let's get straight into this one. Okay, the first Brahmana is just a script of knowledge that's passed on. It's a scripture or a piece of knowledge or a text. Okay, the progressive definition of Brahman, which is the consciousness. So this is talking about a discussion between I would say a seer and a student, or someone who wishes to learn. They lived formerly Drupta Balaki of the Gargya clan. He said to Ajatasattu of Kasi, another clan I guess, "I will tell you about Brahman." Ajatasattu said, "I give you 1,000 cows for this proposal." While limited, Ajatasattu knows Brahman as the self. So there's one person offering to teach another what Brahman is, or the nature of existence. Gargya said, "The person who is yonder in the sun, indeed do I meditate as Brahman." Ajatasattu said, "Please do not talk to me about him. I meditate on him as all-surpassing, head and king of all beings. As such becomes all-surpassing. The result of meditation corresponds to the form meditated upon according to the view." Absolutely. So the meditation and what we get out of it will be akin and by direct correlation to our spiritual expansion. Meditation, prayer, silence, whatever practice you use will follow our expansive journey. So this is effectively saying that which is revealed to us upon meditation will be in correlation to the state of expansion we've achieved at that particular point in time. Gargya said, "Who is yonder in the moon? On him I meditate as Brahman." Ajatasattu said, "Great white-robed king Soma." Soma was the moon. Soma is the name of the moon and the juice from the creeper which is used in sacrifices. And then the passage goes on in various, it uses various, uses the moon, it uses the sun, it uses lightning, it uses ether, it uses air to describe various, as metaphors for various things within the nature of expanding to Brahma. In other words, it's saying achieving Brahma is achieved through understanding all things and absorbing all things for me. And so you can see here, Gargya said, "The person who is yonder in lightning, I meditate as Brahman, I meditate on him such becomes radiance." So lightning becomes the radiance. And again, he's talking about here, a person who is in ether, on him I meditate as Brahman, I meditate on him. He who meditates on him is filled with offspring and cattle. So again, this is intended back 700 BC, offspring and surviving offspring, and cattle being the nature of that sustains life, was awarded. And Gargya then goes on to say, person who is here in air, Ajatasattu said, he who meditates on him as such becomes indeed victorious, unconquerable, and a conqueror of enemies. So it's regarding associating air with that. As another attribute or aspect of ascent into the pure absolute Brahman, which is absolute consciousness. Gurgya said, "Who is here in fire? On him indeed do I meditate as Brahman." Ajatasattu said, "Who meditates on him becomes indeed forbearing and his offspring." Gurgya again said, "Who is this in water?" And again, I meditate on him in Brahman, as Ajatasattu states. Who meditates on him as such, him becomes what is like him, not what is unlike him. This is saying that you become your infinite self, your Brahma self, your spirit, your supreme spirit consciousness, which is your divine infinite spirit, and not something that is unlike yourself, i.e. Being. You become unlike yourself is non-being, and what comes like him is being. Gurgya said, "Who is here in the mirror? I meditate as Brahman." Ajatasattu said, "He who meditates on him as such becomes shining indeed. He also outshines all those with whom he comes in contact." This is talking about spiritual elevation, nothing more. And again, he's talking about sound. He who meditates on him becomes attains a full term of life. The breath, which is the spirit, does not depart. So the breath is also associated with spirit, not just attaining spirit through breath, which does not depart. So he has a full term of life in turn. In other words, serves out his intended purpose to its full. Gurgya said, "Who in here is the quarters of heaven? Do I meditate on as Brahman?" And it says, "I meditate on him because who meditates on him, i.e. Brahman, becomes possessed of a second. His company is not cut off from him." Possessed of a second, the second is our true self, the being self, as opposed to the non-being self, which from a matter perspective could be the first. Okay, and Gurgya said, "Person here who consists of shadow, I meditate as Brahma." Ajatasattu said, "Who meditates on him as such attains a full term of life in this world, does not come to him before his time." Again, we've just talked about that in shadow. Gurgya said, "Who is this in self?" And again, who meditates on him becomes self-possessed, which is, in other words, his offspring becomes self-possessed. The true self, not ego self-possessed. It's talking about the nature of the spirit becomes the all-encompassing aspect of self, which is what this means in terms of self-possessed. Gurgya becomes silence. This is the end of that conversation, or so we think. And Ajatasattu said, "Is that all?" "That is all," said Gurgya. Ajatasattu said, "I shall make you know him clearly." So he's using all these metaphors to help this particular Gurgya understand that the nature of Brahma is all things, and he's using metaphors of the material and cosmic realm and nature realm to describe it. Okay, self-possession is the quality of those who are cultivated. And again, as I mentioned, self-possession is the spirit encompassing the self. And who are cultivated are those who are on the spiritual journey. In other words, those who have watered the soils of their journey and therefore cultivated the spiritual awakening and awareness and unraveling eternal knowing. And so Ajatasattu continues to say, "When this person who consists of intelligence fell asleep, this is where it was, and whence did it come back." So he's saying that when you're asleep, you wake up and your consciousness, your divine consciousness is still present. So it's saying that it's always there, it never leaves. So it must be something that it's infinite and eternal, because when you sleep, it doesn't disappear. Ajatasattu said, "When this being fell asleep, thus consists of intelligence." So there must be a consciousness there. "By his intelligence taken to himself, the intelligence of these breaths, the spirit, rests in the space within the heart," which is the spirit, is next to the heart space, "is restrained. Speech is restrained, the eye is restrained, the ear is restrained, and the mind is restrained during sleep. When he moved about in dream, these are his worlds. Taking his breaths, which are also the senses of breath, is Senses, the breath to relieve spirit. Consciousness through the concentration of breath, and breath also meaning spirit. There's many definitions of this depending on the context in which it's used. Moves about in his own body as he pleases. Again, when one falls sound asleep, when he knows nothing whatsoever, having come through the 72,000 channels called Hita. I don't know what the 72,000 channels are, but extend the heart to the pericardium, a membrane enclosing the heart. So what he's talking about here, the 72 channels, if we look at this is talking about the membranes, the veins around the heart space. The pericardium is the membrane enclosing the heart and the heart itself. So this is talking about the 72,000 channels are the membranes that surround the heart space, carrying the blood or the flow of blood, and therefore also breath, in other words, being life force. As a youth, great Brahma might rest when he has reached the summit of bliss, so does he then rest. The heart are the veins. These are the 5 colours uniting with the rays of the sun, similarly coloured. So they're saying the heart has veins with various representing colours. The sun or rather the sun's rays. The sun and the heart are said to be connected with each other. At death, the soul is said to pass out by the veins and the rays of the sun, which the wise find open. As spider moves along the thread, so from this self come forth all breaths, all worlds, all divinities, all beings. Its secret meaning, vital breaths are the truth, and their truth is itself. So this is basically talking about the thread of expansion, and through that is the revealing of all worlds, all divinities, all beings, all secrets, all knowing, and the truth. Okay, and we continue. Second Brahmana, which is breath embodied in a person. Who knows the newborn babe? Now the babe is a subtle body, not a baby. It's nor physical nor solely spiritual. I think it's the etheric energy body with the auric body, I would suggest. With this abode, his covering, his post, and we'll talk about the post in a moment, his rope, his 7 hostile kingsmen. Okay, 7 kingsmen are said to be the 7 organs, which are the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the nostrils, and the mouth. The 2 nostrils and the mouth. The hinder the perception of the inner self. These man becomes attached to the world. So in other words, what it's talking about here is that his hostile kingsmen are the attachment to only the senses, eyes, ears, nostril, mouth, and touch. Of course, they hinder the inner self from revealing itself, and then you become attached to the world. The 7 imperishable ones stand near him to serve. These red streaks in the eye is the water in the eye. So he's talking about 7 perishable ones stand near him, which is to serve, which are the hostile kinsmen, I would suggest. These red streaks in the eye is the water in the eye. With the water in the eye is united by him. Pupil of the eye is sun, is united by him. The black of the eye is the fire, is united by him. White of the eye is Indra, which is weather and rain. Lower and upper eyelash are united by him. You can see these passages, even though they don't make a lot of, now we read them, they think, well, this is so excessive metaphorical construct. This is how they describe things, by using aspects of their own human body and of animals. Now reading this to us, this is really just sounds like nonsense, right? But it sounds excessive metaphorical nonsense. But at the time, I expect this would be the best way of describing things. The 7 imperishable ones are so called because they produce imperishableness by supplying food for the subtle body. Okay, the third Brahmana are the 2 forms of reality. There are 2 forms of Brahman, the formed and the formless, i.e. the material and the non-material, or the mortal and the immortal, the unmoving and the moving, the actual, which is the existent material, and the true, which is the being, which is the spirit and the spiritual. This is formed Brahman, is different from the air and the atmosphere. It is mortal, unmoving, actual, is the yonder sun, which gives essence of the actual. So he's talking about the actual is that things that we can experience, i.e. the yonder sun is the actual, and it gives the essence to the actual. But the Brahman is the true being, the formlessness, the immortal, and the moving aspect of ourselves. Now the formless is in the air, atmosphere, and is immortal, is moving, and is the true. This unformed, this immortal, this moving, true is this person who is in the region of the sun, for he is the essence of true. The sun is regarded as all its rays, it's the giver of life, the foundation of life from the cosmos, as it would have been looked upon, and it's talking about the spirit being that which is immortal, which is moving, which is constantly alive and shifting and changing, which is a true being, i.e. the true is this person, and it's a true essence. The form of this person, a saffron-coloured robe like white wool, like a flame of fire, like a white lotus, like a sudden flash of lightning. Who knows it, this attains splendour like a sudden flash of lightning. There is the teaching, vital breath is truth, and he is the truth of that. The vital breath is truth, the breath being spirit, he is the truth of that. When they're talking about that, they're talking, when they mean truth of that, the word that is talking about divine spirit. And again, lots of descriptors here about what it means. It's a splendour like a white wool, or a flame of a fire, a white lotus, a sudden flash of lightning. This is coming in the next sentence and the next passage, and I want to explain that. Like a sudden flash of lightning, enlightenment is said to be instantaneous. It's truly partially true, and I'll explain why in a moment. Maitreya speaks of the Buddha. This only you yourself can know yourself, who are beyond number, beyond thought, beyond comparison. That is true. Only you can know yourself by going inward and embarking on that journey to the self. But like a sudden flash of lightning, enlightenment is said to be instantaneous. It is actually. That part is true. There will be a sudden awakening in one when the study is what we call in the UK or England the penny drops. And that happens. You can study and it's kind of process, not quite understanding, and at some moment it could be in a sleep, it could be walking silently in a park where your mind is still. You'll suddenly have a revelation of understanding, and this is that flash of lightning. Things will start to become understood in a very sudden way, and from that sudden way the gradualism of an expanding knowing then embarks upon itself to us, unveils itself to us rather, and we embark upon that journey. But the actual sudden knowing, the aspect of knowing, can be quite instantaneous. You suddenly think, oh, I suddenly understand. Through trying to understand, you suddenly just do. This does happen, maybe not to all, and then a gradual, constant unveiling of knowledge, of knowing, starts to shift faster and faster within us. But that isn't suddenly and spontaneous, but the trigger for that can be instantaneous within us. Okay, this is a sidebar. I had some sidebar information which I quite liked and I added in here. So Shackleton Bailey, who wrote in The Republic, said that the God is an impersonal form of the good. And I like these definitions. Plato Timaeus defined the divine as self-moving spirit fit to receive the name of God. And the Upanisads say that the impersonal and the self-moving spirit are two to be recognized, i.e. they're the same thing, so we should see them as two same things and not two different realities. The fourth gospel says God works in the world through the Logos, which is the divine spirit. Yes, it does. It works in us through ourselves, through our Christ Krishna consciousness, our Buddhic consciousness, our overall divine consciousness within ourselves, which is how the divine works in us, because it is in us through that spirit. Okay, Plotinus, in heaven, as the rich intelligible of spiritual world in which our individuality is preserved, human soul may transcend even the realm of spirit to the communion with the one. Dionysius, which is a Christian Neoplatonist, called God absolutely no thing. It's above all existence. It's a triad, can express the all-transcending hiddenness. Now I call the triad the spirit, the heart, and the mind, the shaft being the body. Cotus Eurigena says, God is excellence. His excellence may rightly be called nothing. So they're all saying that the Godhead is actually something that we can't define. It's not something that can be measured. It's never something that can be known in mind. So when people say, I just don't know if God's real, you're never going to know God's real, or the divine is real, or the Godhead is real, or source is real, or the divine consciousness is real. You have to feel it. It comes to you through knowing, which is an emotive thing. Knowledge is not mental. It's seeded in our spiritual, energetic selves, and then received by the mind as knowledge for translation to our conscious selves. Okay, the fourth Brahmana, the conversation of Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi on the absolute self. Now these words, I apologize if I am absolutely butchering some of these, but I do find it difficult to pronounce all of these names. Maitreyi and Yajnavalkya, Maitreyi said to Yajnavalkya, I am about to go forth from this state, householder. Let me make a final settlement between you and that Katayani. Yajnavalkya wishes to renounce the stage of householder and enter that of anchorite. Now, if you remember early in the passages, there were three stages of passages, if you like. There was the younger man or the student, and then there was the person who then got married, had children, became a householder and dedicated life to raising a family and so forth. And when that was done, you then embarked upon a much more path of realization, where one would say you'd retreat into a forest or a cave and become join that passage of spiritual enlightenment. There were like three phases of life that were described in the Vedas and the Upanisads, in what we described in the introductory chapters. This is what we went through, and this is what's happening here. This person who wants to move from the state of householder because he's raised the children wants to now retreat into a true spiritual practice. Then Maitreyi said, Sir, this whole earth filled with wealth, if this whole earth was filled with wealth were mine, would I be immortal through that? And then Yajnavalkya said, no. Rich even so you would your life be. Of immortality there is no hope through wealth, which we know. Then Yajnavalkya came to sit down. I will explain to you, even as I am explaining, reflect on what I say. Priya is dear, because you wish to learn the truth. So Priya means dear. Dear, in the interpretation of dear in Vedas, is talking about those who wish to learn truth. Priya is dear, which means those who wish to learn truth. We're going to come across this later again. Okay, those who recite the Vedas without understanding their meaning are compared by Sayana to lifeless pillars which bear the weight of the roof. This would say that they hold a lot of knowledge, but they're not released from the weight of knowledge through understanding the spiritual awareness, which then unravels a weightless knowing, a weightless expansion to oneself. So that's where I would say a pillar to bear the weight of the roof. What Krishna says to Arjuna in the Uttara Gita, just as a donkey bearing the weight of sandalwood knows its weight but not its fragrance, so also is a Brahmana who knows the text of the Vedas and scriptures but not their significance. It is said that some people are clever only at the expounding, while others have the ability to practice what they learn. This is absolutely true in any spiritual practice, any text that you may read, any scripture, any book, any philosophy. We're not to read it through as an intellectual discourse. The only way that these texts and these words that are written for us to read, no matter how old they are, and what pages they are written on. If we don't understand what we're reading, and we interpreted them from a spiritual perspective, from an expanse, from a journey towards the Godhead perspective, if we don't understand them, they just become mental discourse and an occupation. They only become effective when we truly understand the nature of what they are actually trying to say, which is one of the objectives of what this channel is about. Okay, and it continues the fourth Brahmana. Then he said, husband is the husband dear, but a husband is dear for the sake of the self. This is, remember, the dear is the one that wishes to seek and understand the truth. And it also talks about the wife. The wife is dear, but a wife is dear for the sake of the self. Again, seeking truth. For the sake of the gods are the gods dear, but the gods are dear for the sake of the self. We pass through the experience of demigods and gods and deities and archetypes on our passage to understand the true self and the divine Godhead. O Maitreyi, it is the self that should be seen, heard of, reflected on, meditated upon, seeing of, hearing of, thinking of, understanding of the self. All this is known. So this is talking about ultimately we need to approach the divine spirit within us. All objects of the world, earthly possessions, romantic delights, and this is a very nice way of saying lustful preoccupation. Romantic delights provide opportunities for the realization of the self, which is talking about through these things we should have an urge to move beyond them, because we should be seeking and asking questions. There must be more than this, more than our lustful ego selves, more than accumulation of earthly possessions. That's not always the case. Many people don't have a true spiritual. Their spirit is so depressed within them. The pilot light is behind a very the surface ego self, the lustful self, the intellectual, self-righteous, virtuous self. The human aspects of them are far more greater and powerful. So therefore, the light doesn't have enough force to impact the external self. So therefore, the entire life is spent on earthly possessions, romantic delights, and so on and so forth. Okay, contemplation is not mere philosophical thought. Exactly. We need to understand things, not just entertain our minds with what we are trying to understand. It is higher stage of spiritual consciousness. It secures the direct conviction of the reality, i.e., and also connection. Conviction is something we stand firm in. While a teacher can help, a personal effort alone can take us to the goal of realization. Absolutely, it will always end with ourselves. The Yama and the Buddhist systems state 3 states of religious development, and the Jains say the 3 jewels of religious development. This is called right belief, right knowledge, and right conduct. Now, the Buddhists do say this, and when we go into the Buddhist text, you'll see this again. The Brahmana, which is sacred knowledge, again, text, scripture, sacred knowledge, ignores one who knows him as different from the self. So the Brahmana is ourself. It's a sacred knowledge revealing ourselves to ourselves, which is the self. The Kshatriya, which is the power, ignores one who knows him as different from the self. The gods ignore one who knows them as different from the self, and so forth. All knowledge and all wisdom are the breath of the eternal Brahman, the great reality. It is great because it is greater than everything else and is the source of all else. Breathing, as a man breathes without effort, so all those come out of the Supreme without effort. Yeah, it does. Once we hit that instantaneous release, there's just a knowing which starts flowing out. As long as we don't block it with our minds, it just starts to flow out. As the ocean is the one goal, a uniting place, an ocean being a uniting place because it's combined water, as the heart is the one goal of all forms of knowledge. And I always say the spirit is part of the heart space, and then the mind, which is the Trinity, and the shaft of our being is the body itself. All knowledge and all wisdom. Okay, we've talked about that. I'm sorry. The goal to be like the state of dreamless sleep, a state of utter annihilation. For where there is duality, as it were, by what and whom should one hear, should one think, should one understand? The goal to be like the state of dreamless sleep, a state of utter annihilation. So this is talking about the annihilation of the material and ego self. In a dreamless sleep, it's stated here that is where we release our physical selves and we enter a different realm of consciousness. And this is a duality where that if we should understand from whom we should hear and should think and should understand, which is the self. Okay, the fifth Brahmana, the cosmic and the individual. Okay, this earth is like honey. Now, honey is knowledge, food for ourselves. This earth is like honey for all creatures, and all creatures honey for this earth. Shining, immortal person who is in the body. He indeed is just this self. This is immortal, this is Brahman, this is all. The earth and all living beings are mutually dependent. Yes. Brahman is the self in each. Yes, everything consists of a divine spirit. We've talked about this as well. In the earth and in the individual. This water is like honey for all beings. Shining, immortal. As the seed is seed in the body, this is Brahman. Fire is like honey, is made of speech. This is Brahman. Air is like honey, who is breath in the body. He is just this self. This is Brahman. Sun is like honey for all beings. The sun, and with reference to oneself, in the eye, he is just this self. This is immortal. This is Brahman. It continues on. Moon is like honey to all beings. This shining immortal person who is in the mind, he is just this self. This is Brahman. It goes on and on and on into clouds, which equals sound and tone, and space equals heart, and law is law bindingness, and it goes on. So it's again using descriptors and metaphors and things of the material to describe that Brahman is effectively everything. The pure divine consciousness, or the divine, is in all things, and all things are of and from the divine, or created through the infinite realm stream of probability and possibility, which is what we manifest things through free will into those energetic streams of possibility and probability. So therefore and those come from the divine, so everything is Brahman. The self and dharma is cosmic law of I would say destruction, preservation and creation, and others, and karmic law, free will. All righteousness are regarded as equivalent. Dharma as light and refuge and none other. The end of the way is to become what we are to become, Brahman. When it says the light end of the way, no other, cosmic law is what governs everything. We cannot ever avoid it. Karmic law, destruction, preservation and creation, all of this, the nature of energy, all of this is cosmic law and we cannot avoid it. Or the Buddha, this is like, so I'll repeat that again. The end of the way is to become what we are to become, which is Brahman or the Buddha. This truth is like honey for all beings, honey for thus truth. This shining immortal person who exists as truthfulness, he is just the self. It's always referring to the self as a divine spirit. This is the immortal. This is Brahman. Mankind is like honey, who exists as a human being. The self is Brahman. Self is like honey. Again, knowledge, truth. Person who is in this individual self is just this self. Again, it's a long passage which effectively is saying that we are on the passage to become and realize our true self, which is the divine spirit within us, to unravel it, allow it to become at the forefront of our being. So we move away from non-being, which is the material, matter-orientated, attached person, and become that Brahman or Buddha, which are similar states of consciousness. This self is the Lord of all beings, the King of all beings. As all the spokes are held together in the hub and the felly of a wheel, just so is this self. All beings, all gods, all worlds, all breathing creatures, all these selves are held together. I like the hub and felly of the wheel, spokes and hub. There are many spokes on the wheel and we'll traverse many of them towards the center or the hub of the wheel. But the hub of the wheel for me is your individual passage. The spokes are different ways to get to your individual passage. Remember, you'll start, I would say the felly of the wheel, which is the rim, is the self coming into life. As we go through life, the wheel spins and the various spokes, we jump onto ideologies philosophies, religions, thought systems, dogma, doctrines, ego, virtue signaling, self-grandizing, and so forth. Very aspects of things, these spokes of the wheel, which are limitless. And then we can jump over many of them or traverse few, but we'll move towards the center, the hub. And that again is the self, because once we've released and have evolved past those spokes, the passage continues back to how it started, which is within and into your own divine self. And again, honey is equating to knowledge. Okay. Bit of dry mouth there. And the sixth Brahmana, which just talks about the line of teachers and pupils. This goes on for about 3 pages. And I've only done a few, quoted a few here just to give you the vibe of what's going on in there. There's nothing to really read other than continuation of what I've put here. And it goes, now the line of tradition of teachers. Puti Masya received the teaching from Gapuvana. Gapuvana from another Puti Masya. This Puti Masya from another Gapuvana, this Puti Masya, it goes on. So it goes on and on and on, effectively saying that one teacher got the teaching from another, and then they passed it on to another, and then who then taught another, and it goes on with various names over and over and over again for about 3 pages, believe it or not. So what they're saying here is they are capturing. It's not just a list of names. We've got to look beyond that. It's capturing the nature of the varied sources. Remember, the Upanishads were created not by one person. It wasn't compiled by a single hand. It was contributed to by many seers, many Aranyakas who had retreated into forests, people who were monks and seers and holy people, sadhus who went over into caves or whatever, a meditative practice, and came with their spiritual knowing, the esoteric unveiling of knowledge that they had within themselves, and contributed to this and passed it on to each other over that 700 to 400 BC time span. And then therefore the Upanishads were created. So this is kind of talking about lineage, the lineage of how information was shared and passed down, communicated to, and it contributed to Upanishads, and the kind of the journey of the many hundreds of years that this was then pulled together. Okay, that concludes this one. It was much shorter than the previous one, which was an hour 20. This is 38 minutes, so I hope this is well absorbable. The next chapter is actually much longer than this one, so this will take a little longer when I go through. But remember, the second coming is you. Effectively, you need to become what we're trying to become, what we're discussing here on this channel. The journey is yourself. We'll jump on many spokes, and we'll traverse many spokes. Listening to this channel, reading these scriptures yourself, listening to gurus, teachers, rabbis, priests, and popes, and so forth. Other scriptures, other texts, philosophies are all spokes on the wheel, and none of them are redundant, none of them are irrelevant, none of them are wrong. They're just the ones that you and I individually may need to traverse. Remember, always traverse and try to move towards the center of the wheel, which is the hub, because once you get there, what's needed to be attained on the scopes is lessened, and the journey, you still extract information, but you're not on a spoke anymore. You're in the hub of the wheel, which is your own passage of unveiling, and then the spirit is guiding you forward. Okay, and then obviously there's a book there on Amazon if you wish to contact me on spiritlounge333@gmail.com, and anything else that you'd like me to look at in the future, feel free to kind of let me know what that may be. So I just want to put the camera back on there and say thank you so much for listening. It was a nice and much shorter version of 40 minutes today, better than 120 on the last one. But the next chapter will be long because it's much longer than this one. And again, you'll see with the Upanishads, they're complex in their metaphorical nature. They're complex in their archetypal nature. They're complex in their descriptive nature. They use a lot of aspects of nature, aspects of our physical selves, aspects of animals, aspects of the cosmic bodies above in the heavens, to help describe what it is they're receiving. And for us, reading it, nearly 3,000 years later, it can get tiresome and very difficult to read. And you're reading this, you're thinking, okay, it's going on and on and on. And it does go on and on and on sometimes, but we must interpret these things in a very spiritual manner and understand the nature of where they came from. So what I'm trying to do is pull out these meaningful aspects of the Sanskrit translations with my own interpretation as well, to help my own teaching practice through this channel. But to encourage you guys to absorb these things for yourselves and take away them. Remember, contemplate them all. Don't just digest them here. It all needs to be meditated on and reflected on, which is where enlightenment really unveils itself. And that instantaneous spark of knowing that then triggers a longer and an infinite and eternal aspect of knowing, which is accelerated, will occur. But it needs to occur when you allow this spiritual space to really ignite. And that's really a free will choice of each of us. Okay, and so thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it, and all of your time. I want to say God bless and look after yourselves next time. Thank you so much.